No one expected this to happen in Burkina Faso. A town that yesterday was a symbol of vitality was reduced to ashes overnight. Djiboua, a name the world had barely heard, suddenly became the epicenter, shaking the corridors of global power. This was not just an attack. This was a message, written in fire and silence, to a people who dared to stand up for themselves. 200 soldiers were reportedly killed. A community was wiped out, but the deeper truth remained hidden behind the smoke. Who orchestrated this scenario? Why here? Why now? This was not simply war. This was design. This was a battle to redefine sovereignty. If you believe stories like this need to be heard, leave a comment, like, and subscribe. The fires of Burkina Faso speak for us. On August 25, several international news agencies published the figure, 200 Burkina Faso soldiers killed in Djiboua, claimed by an Al-Qaeda affiliate. The information came not from the Burkina Faso military, nor from the Red Cross, but from a private Western company that monitors extremist groups. Within hours, the number would spread around the world as an undeniable truth. But Djiboua was no random town. It had just become the center of the Traoré government's strategy of decentralization, resource control, and food security. So the attack was not just aimed at soldiers, it was aimed at destroying a symbol of emerging sovereignty. The question is, who was really behind it? From here, the story takes a darker turn. Not all that burned in the dark was chaos. Sometimes, fires are lit to send a chilling message that power can be broken, that new orders can be snuffed out before they even begin. Djiboua is proof. The attack here was not a spontaneous act of wandering terrorists. It was calculated, planned step by step, with a precision that would have astonished even Western military academies. Djiboua was burned, but in its ashes, one could see the shadow of something even more terrible, a warning to Burkina Faso and the Sahel alliance. That night, there was not only gunfire and bloodshed, but also the chilling voices of those who wanted to extinguish the dream of independence. Why Djiboua? Why did the enemy choose that town, rather than a major military base or a capital city? The answer lies in Ibrahim Traoré's bold policy. Just a few months ago, he had turned Djiboua into a strategic choke point, a new logistics route for the army, a gateway for distributing food to the north, and a transit point for gold and resources under direct state control. In Djiboua, Burkina Faso's young government began to break the capital's monopoly, decentralize power to the local level, and lay the foundations for a new order. For those accustomed to running the country from afar, through a few offices in Ouagadougou, Djiboua was the crack. Once the crack widened, the entire old system, from the foreign-friendly elite to the international mining companies, would collapse. So Djiboua had to be broken. But the way it was broken was unlike any previous rebel attack. One saw a complete scenario, first the barracks, then the police station, then the hospital, and finally the market and the food depot. It was a strategy of taking away life, eliminating law, health, and food, to turn a community into a mass corpse. There was no sign of movement. No convoy was detected. The attackers came like ghosts, and disappeared just as quickly. Witnesses even reported seeing strange drones hovering in the sky before the shooting. These were not old UAVs of the Burkina Faso army, but modern reconnaissance aircraft, manufactured by manufacturers outside of Africa. So who put that eye in the sky over Djiboua? Who provided the maps, coordinates, and plans for a NATO-standard raid right in the Sahel desert? Djiboua, therefore, was no longer an ordinary town. It had become a message in blood. The message has several layers. First layer, to Traoré, you are not invincible. We can strike anywhere, anytime. Second layer, to the people of Burkina Faso, this government cannot protect you. The new order is an illusion. Third layer, to the world, AES Sahel alliance is unstable, investing in them is suicide. In that game, the masterminds achieved many goals at once, damaging the government's image, instilling fear in the people, and causing international capital flows to falter. But there was one thing they did not anticipate, the opposite effect. Because in the midst of the fire, the people of Burkina Faso began to realize the truth: the enemy was not just a few rebel groups, but an entire global power system that did not want them to live freely. And in the pain of Djiboua, A new anger was born, fierce, enduring, and harder to extinguish than any fire. Ibrahim Traoré, the man in the red beret, could no longer avoid the question: how could a young government stand firm against such remotely coordinated attacks? He understood that this was not just an armed war, but a war of information, finance, and will. When Site Intelligence Group, a private U.S. company specializing in releasing terrorist information, was the first source to announce 200 Burkina Faso soldiers killed in action, the world immediately believed the scenario that Traoré's army is disintegrating. There were no independent witnesses, no official confirmation, but the number was repeated by global news agencies, becoming a truth. Information became a weapon. Numbers became bullets. Djiboua was shot down not only by real bullets, but also by news bullets fired from thousands of kilometers away. Here, the big question arises: will Traoré just be a victim of the game, or will he turn this tragedy into a springboard to expose the enemy, strengthen national spirit, and redefine AES strategy? If you believe that Djiboua's pain is not the end but a wake-up call for an entire continent, share your thoughts in the comments section. Because it is our unity, the voice of the community, that makes it impossible to bury the truth. The attack on Djiboua, therefore, cannot be seen as an isolated incident. It is a warning: the opening shot, in a larger battle, where the enemy is hidden, does not carry a flag, does not declare itself publicly, but is everywhere, in the gold market, in the news, in the darkness of the satellites and UAVs hovering over the Sahel. Djiboua was burned, but in the fire. One thing was clearer than ever: Burkina Faso had entered a war to regain its sovereignty, a war that no one could say didn't expect. If someone spread out a map of Burkina Faso and looked at Djiboua today, one would see not just a town under attack, but a vital link in the identity war. Blood was shed, smoke rose, and screams pierced the hearts of every Sahel citizen. But above all, Djiboua became the place that encapsulated the question: will Burkina Faso accept being torn apart again, or will it rise again from the ashes? The attackers thought that, with a series of shootings and an exaggerated death toll, they would break the faith. But ironically, it was in Djiboua that an invisible liquid flowed: solidarity. It is no coincidence that since that incident, the cry, "Burkina Faso will not yield," has echoed not only in Ouagadougou, but also in small villages, where children still study under leaky tin roofs, and old people still tell stories of Sankara by the fire. Djiboua is not just a town on arid land. It is the lifeline connecting Burkina Faso to the north, and the gateway that controls the flow of goods, food, and even gold, the metal that has made the Sahel a lucrative hunting ground for a century. Therefore, the attack in Djiboua cannot be understood as a single terrorist attack. Behind that darkness is another hand, more subtle, quieter, but also more brutal, the hand of forces that fear the rise of Traoré. As Burkina Faso signs new security agreements, joins hands with Mali and Niger, and breaks the Western monopoly, Djiboua has become a strategic target. Because if only the flames of instability here are fanned, the entire dream of an autonomous Burkina Faso will be shaken. And so, the information about 200 dead soldiers is released, like an information bomb, hitting straight into the psychology. But the strange thing is, the families in Djiboua do not cry over the 200 bodies, because they know the truth. They are only angry, indignant, because people far away, sitting in cold offices, dare to consider the lives of their children as bargaining chips. After that incident, Traoré did not appear on television immediately. He did not shout out ironclad oaths. Instead, in silence, a series of decisions were made. The Burkina Faso army expanded its siege in the north. Not to take revenge, but to control the networks that fed terrorism at the root. The smuggling routes of oil, food, and weapons were cut off. Local militias were hastily trained to coordinate with the regular army. Djiboua, from a place of pain, turned into a training center, where each boy and girl learned how to hold a gun to protect the village, how to build fences, and most importantly, how not to believe in fake news. It was this sobriety that became a new weapon, more powerful than guns and bullets. Look into the depths of history. In 1984, when Thomas Sankara changed the name of the country from Upper Volta to Burkina Faso, land of the upright people, he did more than just make a symbolic gesture. He affirmed that every grain of dust, every drop of blood on this land carries a mission: to live proudly, to die proudly. Today, Ibrahim Traoré, in the Jibwa incident, is continuing that history. The enemy wanted to turn Jibwa into a collective shame, a cut for the whole nation to bow down to. But instead, Jibwa was carved as a fulcrum where Burkina Faso proved, we can suffer, but we do not fall. Jibwa cannot be separated from the big picture of the entire Sahel. Because at the same time that Jibwa was attacked, in Mali and Niger, similar moves were taking place: raids, fake news, divide and rule, plots repeating the same formula. And if Jibwa falls, the entire Sahel Alliance AES will also be shaken. But in fact, the opposite is happening. Jibwa is like an alarm bell, causing the AES to tighten its ranks. The first joint military exercise between Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger was deployed not long after this incident. Russian military advisors began to appear more frequently on the battlefield, not only as tactical allies, but as symbols of a new order being built. Jibwa is blood, it is tears. But Jibwa is also the beginning. That is the sentence carved on the wall of a school temporarily rebuilt after the battle. It is not a propaganda slogan, but an obvious truth. In every Jibwa child's eyes, we see faith. In every handful of soil that the farmer sows after the fire, we see perseverance. And in each of Traoré's subsequent speeches, one hears not just the voice of a president, but the call of a generation that refuses to be divided again. Jibwa is not the end. It is only the prelude to a fiercer confrontation, where not only weapons but also media, diplomacy, and covert tactics will be unleashed. If Jibwa is a test, then that test has proven Burkina Faso is ready to pay the price to protect its sovereignty. But the bigger question is looming: will the international community let a small country stand its ground? Or will it open up other, underground fronts? And will Traoré have the strength to steer the ship in the storm? The answer will only be revealed in the next part of this epic. There are moments in history when an entire country seems to be pushed to the edge of a cliff, where just one misstep could see all the work that has been built up over time go up in smoke. Burkina Faso, in the most tense days surrounding the Jibwa tragedy, was at that moment. All eyes were on Traoré. His opponents were waiting for him to make a mistake. His allies were waiting for him to prove his strength. And the people had only one question in their hearts: will this country survive? When the news of 200 soldiers killed in Jibwa spread, the world was shocked. But the pressure was not only on the number of casualties, but on the speed and intensity of the psychological campaign. In the West, major media outlets, from Paris to Washington, were analyzing the failure of Traoré. Simulations, blood-red maps, malicious commentary, all turned the Jibwa tragedy into an information weapon. In the East, terrorist groups, which receive supplies from underground routes, saw Jibwa as a great victory to recruit more soldiers. They released videos, black flags flying, emphasizing that Burkina Faso's army was not invincible. In the South, some tribal leaders wavered. There were rumors that enemy infiltrators were promising them weapons, gold, and power if they stayed out of the central state's resistance. In the North, the powers hungry for the Sahel's uranium and gold quietly increased their agents, pumping more money into underground channels, hoping Burkina Faso would fall into chaos on its own. Siege from all sides. Traoré knew it. This was the most severe test of his time in power. But the biggest enemy was not always outside. There were small cracks within the country that, if not patched, could tear it apart. In Ouagadougou, the capital, there are generals who have been silent for too long. They have neither openly opposed nor openly supported. It is a dangerous kind of silence, a signal of calculation, scrutiny, and even fear. Young technocrats, who have just been given the opportunity to design energy and infrastructure projects, have also fallen into a deadlock. Fake news has come like a tsunami, causing many projects to be suspended. Asian investors have started calling, demanding explanations about the security situation. At night, Ouagadougou does not sleep. In cafes, in alleys, people are talking. Are 200 people really dead? Why hasn't the government released an official figure? Is Traoré hiding something? The ambiguity in information, partly because of war, partly because of strategic calculation, has become a double-edged sword. It makes it easy for the enemy to manipulate the psychology of the masses. Amidst the swirling sea, Traoré maintained a demeanor that many described as calm as a stone. He did not rush to appear on television to deny it. Nor did he frantically throw out numbers to refute it. Instead, he held continuous meetings with his staff. On the map table, Djibouti was circled in red. Supply lines were connected with a blue pen. Black dots marked the suspected points of foreign intervention. "What do they want?" Traoré asked. An officer replied, "To make the people believe that we have failed." He nodded, "Exactly. So we do not need to rush to prove it with words. We prove it with actions." That sentence, short but like an oath. In this era, it is not just guns and bullets that win, but who tells the story first, who tells it louder. While the West was pouring out news, Traoré launched a soft counterattack strategy. A series of local press reports were funded to go into Djibouti, recording images of villagers still going to the market, children still going to school, and soldiers still patrolling. Not long after, African TV channels broadcast footage that contradicted the disaster described by CNN and AFP. People saw a resilient Djibouti, not ashes. On social media, Burkina Faso's youth turned the hashtag #DjiboutiResists into a nationwide campaign. Each graffiti, each rap, each short video affirmed, "We have not fallen." Although the actual number of casualties remains a military secret. That spiritual strength confused the enemy. They wanted to sow despair, but instead saw the fire of resistance flare up. In September, just when the pressure seemed to be crushing, Traoré made a bold decision, implementing the Green Sahel Plan, a plan that was expected to be announced many years later. Accordingly, Burkina Faso will build a chain of integrated agricultural military bases along the border regions, turning each strategic town into a fortress that is both productive and defensive. Djibouti is the pilot model. The message is clear: you want to destroy? I will build more. You want to scare my people? I will give them reasons to believe. This is a life-or-death move. Because once declared, Traoré is forced to prove it with results. If he fails, it will be the final stab at his reputation. But if he succeeds, the entire Djibouti plot will be dissolved. While the whole country is in turmoil, another danger is quietly emerging: division in the army. Many senior officers believe that Traoré is taking too many risks. They fear that putting more resources into Djibouti will only exhaust the army. Some even discussed in private the alternative solution, the usual language before every coup in African history. It was here that history took a dangerous turn. Traoré knew that a shadow was lurking within his own ranks. He understood, if he did not take control of the situation, someone would take advantage of the Djibouti moment to strike from within. The whole country held its breath. People were both hopeful and anxious. Every news report, every rumor could shake the social spirit. In the villages, young and old gathered around the radio, waiting to hear the voice of the young president. In the capital, students wrote banners, "Djibouti is us." At the border, young soldiers quietly cleaned their guns, looking north. The Sahel weather at the end of the year was chilly, but the political atmosphere was heated. Because everyone understood, either Burkina Faso crossed this threshold of life and death, or everything would collapse. We have walked through layers of smoke and bullets, seen the pieces of truth pieced together into a terrifying strategic picture. But then, at the moment when it seemed like the light of justice had shone into the darkness, a twist occurred. The enemy was not just outside the border. The enemy was sitting within Traoré's own ranks. A secret report leaked from Ouagadougou shows that 48 hours before the Djibouti attack, a strange troop transfer order was signed by a senior officer in the Ministry of Defense. This order accidentally or intentionally withdrew 2 companies from the outer perimeter of Djibouti, leaving a deadly gap for the terrorists to invade. However, when investigated, the electronic records of the order were deleted. The officer disappeared, allegedly in Ghana for medical treatment. This is no longer a hypothesis. An insider hand opened the door for the enemy. Why? The answer is even more frightening. Sources from the Sahel claim that there is a silent group in the Burkina Faso army, previously trained in French and American academies. They would never accept that a young Traoré, from a humble background, would dare to break all ties with Paris. For them, Traoré was not a symbol of independence, but a threat to the old order where they had enjoyed privileges. The attack on Djibouti, it turned out, was more than just a terrorist campaign. It was a test, a button to trigger doubts in the hearts of the people. if the Burkina Faso army could not defend Jibwa, how could they defend Ouagadougou? If 200 soldiers could fall in one night, how could Traoré lead the whole nation against the superpower and the forces of darkness? In the chaos, another truth was revealed: the news of 200 soldiers killed could have been exaggerated by the traitors themselves, to increase public pressure, to shake the people's confidence. There were soldiers who had really died, but the exact number was never confirmed. This means, the traitors do not just give the terrorists the way, they also hold the pen to write the false blood figures. This is the historic moment when Traoré must face not only the bullets from the outside, but also the daggers hidden in the sleeves of his own comrades. And it is here that the greatest tragedy is revealed: Jibwa is not just a battle. It is the message of the traitors to Traoré: we can destroy your dream at any time. In the hot wind of the Sahel, the people begin to whisper, does Traoré have the strength to resist the enemy from within? It is a new darkness, darker than any terrorist army. There is no doubt, Jibwa is not just a battle. It is a mark engraved in the soul of a people walking in the red fire, and also the final test of the perseverance of an entire generation. The enemy wants to sow fear, but from the red blood on the dry land, another belief has grown: Burkina Faso will not bow down. Ibrahim Traoré, amid the siege and darkness, did not fall. He stood like a bronze rampart, like the last symbol of the will to resist all chains. And the young generation, from Ouagadougou to the remote villages, understood: if they do not defend their homeland today, there will be nothing left to defend tomorrow. This is not just a battle for Burkina Faso. This is a call to the entire continent. Africa must rise up, rewrite its own destiny, with its own hands and heart. Backhand index pointing right if you believe that a free Africa is rising. Share, speak up, join. This march has only just begun.